Fresh and
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh. You are all my buds. This is episode 61, and I am joined by a great bud today, Mr. Keith Bartram from the Realm Games. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great.
So we met in New Jersey, and we'll get to a little bit about this, but this has been kind of a long time coming. You kind of had this certain amount of, I guess, enthusiasm that I was like, oh, this guy's really cool. And then I got to learn a little bit about like what you do over at the Realm Games, and we're about to kind of see how crazy you can get in Columbus in a week or so.
Yeah.
So I figured it'd be awesome to have you on before that event. So, you know, hey, if things go, if things get too crazy, we can look back and like, oh, look, they were so positive and hopeful now. It should be a good time. But before we get to what we're going to talk about today, a little bit about you, Keith, and then also about just like running events, you know, from kind of a smaller TO perspective and all that. I do want to shout out the Patreon, which is in full swing. You can join. You can get access to little freshies, which are small little, I guess, bonus eps that I do where I just talk to myself. And then you also get some stickers, and you can kind of get involved with content in a little bit more of a personal way. And you also get a card, a membership card to the Romping Club, which is a Patreon exclusive Discord channel in the Buds Discord, which everybody's welcome to join. But there's a secret special Romping Club channel for all the patrons. So, and on top of that, I do want to shout out our other show, which by the time of this airing we'll have had 4 episodes. The Bud Rush Bellow, which I'm typically joined by Gary, aka Mr. Viz. We have a lot of fun there. You know, kind of get a little bit more loose, a little more crazy, and it's a good time. And it's live. It's on Wednesdays at 9:30 Eastern. And also, let's say hi to Greg. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Greg. You're amazing, Greg.
Oh, thanks, Keith. I think you guys are great too.
Isn't he? He's just the best, except for when he puts things in the end of the show that's making me sound like I hate Levi, which I don't hate Levi. I don't believe the hype. But anyway.
Well, Greg, teach me to be as awesome as you, Greg.
Yeah, listen, it's going to be a master class from him one day.
Okay.
On how to be awesome. So we're joined by you, Keith, today. And for the buds that don't know, you're from the Realm Games, as we said before. And, you know, we're very excited for the Fall Brawl, which is also going to be a battle hardened in Columbus, happening October 22nd. And at the time of this airing will be about a week and a few days away. But before we get into like that and the other big things you all have done over there, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. I think the best way to do that is to kind of see where your history is with trading card games in general.
Yeah, so probably going to be similar to some others you've had on here with just a little bit of twist. My cousin Aaron, he's a brilliant programmer, and he's the one doing all the program stuff for our website. And we have some really cool things coming down the chute that he's working on. But when we were young, probably around 13 or 14, he was like, hey, there's me and some friends play this card game. If you know this, it would be pretty impressive, but it's like a Bible-based CCG, like also came out in the 90s called Redemption. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, me and my buddies, we play this card game. And I was like, I looked at it, I was like, this looks dumb. He's like, why don't you play with this? I'm like, nah, this is dumb. So I went to his birthday that year, and for his birthday, that's what he wanted to do. So all of the other friends came, and like they were playing this card game, and I was like, oh man, I guess I'm gonna have to figure this game out so I'm not a weirdo at this party, which was really weird. So I played it, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. The idea of like collecting cards and getting cards and figuring a deck out. So I got really involved in that, and I actually ended up winning like 3 of their national champions, which is funny because to this day I'm one of only like 2, because they still run their national champions with this game.
Really?
And yeah, to this day, I'm like one of a very few number of people who have won three of them, and I've won two of them back to back. So every now and then, out of the blue, I'll get someone from their vlogosphere contact me, and they're like, "Hey, tell me about this tournament-winning deck you did back in like the '90s or the early 2000s, and about the meta." Because it would basically be like finding someone who played Magic back in the day during like Alpha or Antiquities or something, and be like, "Tell me about how that was in the Wild Wild West," you know. So I did that for a little bit. Then I went off to college, and in college, I got involved in some of the Decipher games, particularly the Lord of the Rings Decipher game.
Mm-hmm.
Love that game. In fact, I have a bunch of sealed product here. I'm trying to see if we can get a bunch of people at the Battle Harden like off hours to play some of the Lord of the Rings Decipher game. It's just a cool game.
Yeah. Now, was that like that? Remind me, was the Lord of the Rings Decipher game like a trading card game? Was it competitive?
Oh yeah, so well, yes, it was a card. It was a TCG, CCG, whatever they want to call it, and it did have a really blossoming competitive field happening. The issue that basically came to the game and then Decipher was in their kind of third season, they got a new president, and he's like, we'll finish the season out like normal. And then on season 4, all of his cards came out, and basically, just like all games, if there's a reprint of a card, the newest version of a card is, the Oracle text, right? Well, they reprinted a bunch of classic cards and just nerfed them to oblivion and made it so that it just kind of like imploded the game. So it basically died at season 4, and then they revamped the game in season 5, and it kind of started gaining some traction. And then Decipher's president got caught just embezzling all kinds of money, and then Decipher just tanked, and all of their games tanked because the company died.
Yeah, I always hear about like games like that from that era, and kind of how they kind of just went away. And I think it's such a shame because you always meet folks that were such huge fans of not only those series but like the game itself. Like our friend of the show, Flake, huge Star Wars CCG guy, and it's kind of interesting to me because I never played them, but I love Lord of the Rings, and at the time I think I would have really enjoyed it. Here's a question for you: do you think that there's a possibility of a resurgence of games like that in a competitive sphere?
I mean, could be. I mean, in a sense, aren't we kind of getting that now? Flesh and Blood. It feels like Flesh and Blood sort of spearheaded some sort of resurgence, and then you had other games pop up like MetaZoo, Dragon Ball. What's the other one? There's another one out. Digimon.
One Piece just came out as well, which I know
a
lot of fans of that. I don't know how the game is.
Yeah, so we kind of do have a little bit of a resurgence here, and I think that what typically happens on a business side of things in this situation, where you have a few people in the area trying to do something and in the same field, and whoever figures out the most profitable and the most player friendly way is going to come out on top.
Absolutely.
And boy, Flesh and Blood has a pretty good corner on some of that market already.
Yeah, they certainly do. Now, that does lead me to my next question. When did Flesh and Blood come into your life, and what way did it come into your life?
Sure. So I'm gonna take a quick step back to make this make sense. After playing the Lord of the Rings, I took a break from CCGs for a while, and then I took a position as a program director at a camp. And summertime was really busy, but in our fall time, we pretty much just did weekend things. And I was looking for something to do, and there's a local game store, and they're like, "Hey, we do Magic," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Like, I had some friends who played Magic throughout all of that time, so I knew kind of the very basic, like there's colors, you tap colors to make mana, and you use the mana to do whatever you want to do. So they're like, "Yeah, we're having this pre-release. You should come out to it." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And in my pre-release, I got a Jace the Mind Sculptor and 3 fetch lands. That was in my pool that's my introduction into Magic the Gathering. And I was like, "Ooh, this Jace card, I like this. This seems fun." So I got into the original Zendikar and my first Magic deck that I put together, and I thought this could do things. Was a mono green big stompy Eldrazi, and I cheated him out with Elvish Piper because all that was standard legal at the time.
Yeah.
And then I realized that wasn't right. But so from there, I went to only maybe 2 Star City events, maybe more than that. Like as a player, I can only remember like 2 or 3. I have this super unlucky thing in Magic where I will only draw lands or I will never draw lands. I mean, I played a deck with 19 lands and Sensei's Divining Top, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Brainstorm. And in my win and in for top 8, I drew 19 lands in a row with Sensei's Divining Top and a Jace out on the table. Absolutely amazing. So I quickly learned that playing Magic is not for me, but trading Magic is. My dad is an entrepreneur, and he's started a few different businesses that me and my brothers have had a great opportunity to be a part of over the years. My dad's risked a lot, and he's worked really hard to build some really cool stuff. And just from a young boy, we would go to swap meets and things like that and trade and barter and squeeze out a nickel from a dime and things like that. And I just kind of learned that hustle, and somehow it just clicked with Magic. And I started going to events, and my friends would be like, "Oh, look, we won top 4 and we got a box of whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. I got 10 dual lands." And they're like, "It feels like you won this event somehow." And so they started giving me their trade binders, and they're like, "You just make our binders better." And I'm like, "Cool." So I got really big into trading Magic, pretty hardcore. And I had some weird trading goals. When Jace got banned, I was gobbling up as many Jaces as I could. I think I had it was probably around 200 to 300 Jason Mind Sculptors.
Oh my god!
Like that's the kind of nutso my collection was. I had this weird thing I was wanting to do. I wanted to burn a 1,000 count box of Alliance Force of Wills. So I started collecting Force of Wills, and I was on the way to doing that. Just a bunch of just really dumb stuff. And then my dad is starting to get to the point where he was retiring. So about 6 years ago, I decided to sell that collection and just use that for some of the different business ventures that my family was doing, and kind of, because I wasn't going to events, I wasn't trading very much, and things were just sitting in a box. So I sold them off, and that was another story, which is pretty cool. And so that's where I thought, because at that point I was like, I'm never touching cards again because I can't get back to that mess.
Yeah.
But the local store owner, his name's James Mann, and obviously did a lot of business with him over the years. And before I sold my collection, he's like, "Why don't you buy my store, and then you can sell your cards retail instead of wholesale?" I was like, "Yeah, that sounds kind of cool." And we looked at that, and I was like, "Yeah, that's not going to work." His numbers and my numbers just weren't jiving. So fast forward about 6 or 7 years later, I played D&D a bunch, and MTG came out with the D&D set, and I was like, you know what? I'll build a cube, and it'll be really fun for my D&D players. They can see some MTG cards and the D&D cards. So I went back to my local game store, and there was James. He's like, "How's it going?" "Great." Got my cube together, and he's like, "Man, I'm still trying to retire. You should still buy the store." And I was like, "Well, what's the price tag?" And he said a number, and I was like, let me see those books. And about 3 months later, I decided to buy the realm. So I went in for a Forgotten Adventures of Forgotten and Lost Realms, and I ended up with a game store.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's like kind of like storybook like, right? This is kind of cool. And also, I mean, I do want to go back to the trading part for just a second here, because like I think a lot of times, like, because at one point you even said, "Oh, TCG or CCG," whatever people say, the Flesh and Blood is a TCG, and so is Magic, right? The T is trading, right? So it's one of those things. Like I used to go to a lot of Magic events, and now I go to a lot of Flesh and Blood events, and I always noticed that there were folks like yourself there just to trade, right?
Oh yeah.
Which is like kind of a cool side of the game, right? And or just the game, like the TCG realm in general. And I think that's pretty awesome. And it's kind of cool that that's what led you to buying this game store. Now, uh, so if my memory is correct, Adventures of the Lost Realm was around COVID, right? Like 2020.
It would have been 2021, the summer of 2021.
So you buy the realm. So that now we're like just over a year. It sounds like.
October 1st was the official purchase. October 1st, 2021 was official purchase date.
That's awesome. So we've just hit a year, and it was just your birthday too. Happy birthday!
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody wish Keith a happy birthday, and now we're seeing some like huge moves here with the Battle Hardened coming up. How has this first year fared for you?
A few things. Like, first of all, James owned the store for about 18 years, and he bought it from someone else who I don't know how long they owned it for.
Mm-hmm.
It was a comic and sports card shop before they even sold Magic. But the Magic, I mean, we have close to at least 2 million cards in Magic.
Wow.
In singles. I mean, there's a lot there. It's pretty cool. People come in from all over the place and they're like, "Hey, do you have whatever?" And we just about always have that. There's a few hot ticket items that we don't have, but and some kind of like the real big reserve moneyless cards because they hit the shelf and they're gone. Like someone brought in a Badlands on Friday at like 7:30 and it was sold at 7:31.
Oh my god!
It was like, yeah, it was sold before I took it. Like, I actually took the card from him. But the interesting thing though is the previous store owner. He did, he had his ways were certain, and his ways were set in a certain way, and he didn't have a lot of tools that I have from doing other businesses. So, I have this whole team of people who help me with payroll and taxes and ordering things and all these different things that is kind of already set up for the other business we have. And I just plugged the realm in there and it kind of upgraded a lot of the just infrastructure for the realm to make it more efficient. And so from that, we were able to hire a couple extra people and do things like that. The interesting thing is they had this big open space that they would play games in, and they, because of COVID and everything, they just purchased it, and then because of COVID, they couldn't use it very well because there wasn't very many events happening, obviously. So that was the first thing when I got the realm that became open where we could start doing events again, like shortly before I bought the realm. And I was like, man, I got to figure out how to take it's pretty big. It's like 8,000 square feet. Like, I got to figure out how to make 8,000 square feet of room needs to make money somehow. So like, we got to start running events or something. And so we just kind of started looking at running some events. And then an old Magic buddy heard that I bought the realm. He came in and he's like, have you heard of this game called Flesh and Blood? I'm like, no, I've not heard of any games in the last year because I've been working. He's like, oh, you should check it out. And he kind of showed me some things, and I was like, oh, that looks very polished for a TCG, because usually they're kind of cheesy when they first come out.
Yeah.
Till they get money. And then I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. But here's the problem. I went through the 90s and the 2000s, and I know that if it's not the big three, it's just going to fail. Let's just call it what it is. And I was like, I just purchased a store. I'm making some infrastructure changes. I did a remodel when I got there and all these different things. And I'm like, there's just no way I can manage a risk like this game at my store. He's like, okay, well, whatever. He goes, but would you be able to order some things for me? And I'm like, sure. Yeah, I can order some things for you. If, prepay some things you want, I'll order them for you. All's good. And he's like, all right, cool. Well, the next expansion coming out is called Tales of Aria. I'd like to get some of the first edition stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. So I contacted our shipper, and I was like, hey, I need some of this first edition. He's like, yeah, okay, I can get you a couple of boxes and stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. And then the calling happened down in Cincinnati, and I was like, you know what? I have this rare opportunity where I don't have anything going on this weekend. I'm going to go down to this Cincinnati calling and just kind of see and put my thumb on the pulse of this game. And I went down there and I was like, oh my goodness, what has happened? I saw so many quality people who I used to play Magic with, and I was like, this is just bonkers. The funny thing is, I keep meaning to tell Jordan and Logan this because they were at that Cincinnati. That's where Flesh and Pod, was
Yeah.
birthed. I do remember seeing Jordan and his bouffant. I don't know what you want to call his hairstyle, yeah, I saw this guy and I was like, oh man, at least some things haven't changed. Where I have that classic gamer and their wild hair. And I remember like passing by them to like go do some trades because I had actually traded for a library for that weekend.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm like, I remember going over and like getting this. I was like, man, I'm just jumping right in the deep end here, getting a library. But anyway, I was like, this is great. I went back and by that time, my brother was wanting to get involved in the realm too, and so I brought him on as a partner. I was like, Jacob, there's this game called Flesh and Blood. Magic's not doing much tournaments, and they're doing tournaments, and the quality of their care with the store and their care with their customers, it's just awesome. This might crash and burn, but it will be a really fun ride for the next year if we can like get into it. He's like, okay. So I contacted LSS. I literally called, or I emailed them and they called me, set up an appointment to call, and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And I said, kind of give him the history I just gave you.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, we're remodeling this tournament center and I can get about 150 people in this tournament center. He's like, you're kidding me. I'm like, no, I'd love to maybe have some bigger events there and stuff. He's like, yeah, well, there's a process. Let's get you set up for armories and let's try to get you some, people coming to your store and get you on distribution and all that fun stuff. So we did all that. That's kind of how Fab came into my life, just like that.
Well, I mean, it's awesome, and you are presenting a different experience than I think a lot of other people, right? Because it very much was presented to you like this is something that you can kind of help facilitate consumer needs, and you kind of, maybe I'm filling in the blanks here, but kind of fell in love with it at the same time. And
sure.
That's really cool. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that you judge. Now, you were judging at Nats. You've judged other events as well. Yep. Can you kind of just give us some insight into that and the judging world in general?
Yeah. So as the Realm have been doing events, our first couple events, they've been getting better and better. When I told you earlier, I used to be a program director for a camp, so I'm quite used to running large scale events for a lot of people. That doesn't intimidate me. I've done that for many years, done hundreds of events, so that part's easy. But then what did become apparent as a weakness that I had as an tournament organizer is the judge side of things. I didn't understand some of the needs that judges have. I didn't understand some of the requirements that I even wanted from judges who I hire. So I was like, "Ooh, we got to take care of that problem." So during this whole last season, I kind of really, really just dove deep into the judge community, did a bunch of studying. I took all my tests. I've reached out to some of the level 2s and have started, cultivating a relationship and getting a lot of feedback from them. Ward, he's from Star City. The dude's busy, but he was able to help get me in touch with some other people. Nick was probably one of the first level 2s that I physically judged together with, and man, Nick was just absolutely phenomenal. Just a top-notch judge. I mean, he's personable. He's a good communicator. He's a good organizer. It was just everything I needed to become a better judge for our events. And then when we went to Nats, there's Tim from. Do you know Tim? He's your way somewhere. I think he's Maryland, maybe.
I might know him, but yeah, not off the top of my head.
He was at New Jersey, but I didn't know if you maybe bumped into some maybe bigger events over there on the East Coast, but Tim is another level 2. He does a lot of the testing, like he writes a lot of test questions, and
Mhm.
he and I have talked a bunch. And he was my team lead at US Nats, and just getting these really high quality people investing into my judgeship, I felt was just really really cool. Something that's interesting about Flesh and Blood is it's attracting a lot of new blood to the TCG world, and there's a lot of new players that have never touched a card game like this before, and then there's also judges who have never judged a card game like this before. I did some judging in the Redemption and the Lord of the Rings a little bit, and then I kind of dabbled with that in the Magic, and then just realized it's not worth my time because I need to trade. I'm losing money judging, so I just tipped my toe in that a little bit. But the interesting thing is, right now the game is so young and so fresh, and I think a lot of experienced players have gone through some very polished games, and they see Magic's judge community after 30 years and get a little frustrated with Flesh and Bloods because it's a little over a year old, 2 years old.
Mhm.
We got a lot of growing to do, and the problem is the game has outpaced events. For example, in the Ohio Valley, we don't have any L2s. That's something I'm really working hard for, because in a probably sometime next year, some of these events are going to require an L2 head judging it.
Yeah.
And that basically, if we don't get some L2s in Ohio, it's going to cost a lot of money to run some of these events next year. So, just things like that, but it's a growing process. We got to train people. Like at US Nats, I was surprised in the draft portion of just how many players had presenting deck errors. It was Ninja Cards and Dromai and
Mhm.
Phoenix Flames and Icelander decks. No joke, that happened twice.
Oh my god.
2 games I came over and they're like, I'm playing Icelander and I have Phoenix Flames in my deck. I'm like, yeah, that's a problem.
Oh my god.
I was
Yeah.
like, how does this happen at US Nats? But then, like, I talked to the players and I'm like, yeah, like, this is my first TCG. I'm like, okay.
I will say, and I could see, what you're saying about folks looking at this judge community and kind of comparing it to like Magic or whatever. But I will say that, I was able to attend Orlando last year, and I attended obviously Charlotte this year. And just like comparing the two events, the judging has grown and like become so much tighter, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In general, like I clearly remember asking questions to judges last year where they didn't really know, which is fine. I'm sure a lot of them are very new, and now, if the question like can't be answered, there is resources like immediately on hand, right? Which is really cool, and yeah, it's awesome to see, and I'm looking forward to it growing a little bit more. Here's a question for you. You do play a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
In the end of the day, would you rather judge or play an event?
Uh, I guess it's tricky. I guess it sort of depends. Like,
Mhm.
as a lover of Flesh and Blood, I would rather be playing the game.
Yeah.
But also, as a lover of Flesh and Blood, I also understand the great value of a quality ran tournament.
Mhm.
So if I can be a quality judge that helps make a tournament go smoothly and has high credibility and accuracy in play, there's great value to that. So it just kind of depends. Like, if there's other quality judges around, yeah, let me sleeve that deck up and play.
Oh yeah.
But I don't mind doing that either. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
mind judging either.
That's great. That's what we like to hear. It's like, hey, you love it either way, whether you're doing one thing or the other.
That's true. I would say this. This is probably one of the biggest things I would say to the community listening, like, especially if you're new to TCGs or not. Think about this. The judges themselves are new to TCGs, or a lot of them are new to TCGs. And what happens in some of these larger events is the newer judges are put out on the floor to give them more experience. And there's a structure set up so like they can only issue certain penalties on the floor. Say if they think, oh, this is a penalty that's such a level, then they have to go get their team lead or a head judge and say, hey, I want to give out this penalty, and then that judge asks them more questions to make sure we're not getting bad judge calls that way. But after a judge has given you a judge call or a ruling and you have any confusion of that at all, appeal. There's nothing that doesn't hurt anyone's feelings. That's the point of appeals, because I think I heard some things that happened at US Nats that probably could have been resolved way more amicably and created a better tournament environment if the players were confident enough to just go, I want to appeal that. And then also that also helps the judge community, because then that judge will have a point of interaction with a head judge or a more experienced judge who will tell them, hey, this is the correct ruling, or you did this correctly. It either reinforces their good behavior or it teaches them how to correct their bad behavior.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to put out there, because it's most important that you walk away from those things knowing exactly what happened and why it did, right?
Oh, sure.
And because then you get people online maybe making a tweet or a comment about, this happened, I don't get it, and it felt unfair. But if you have some understanding, it's important, and I think that can be applied to a lot of different things in the game and life.
Let me throw this back to you, Tommy. Like after a big tournament, you go home or go back to your hotel, and what do? You replay all of the day's games, right?
Yeah.
And you keep asking yourself, what? How did I make this mistake? How could I have done this better?
Why did I sleeve up Leviathan?
Yeah. Well, not everyone can make terrible decisions. So. But no, you'll wake up in the middle of the night going, oh my goodness, I could have won my last match if I would have just done A, B, or C. Well, the judges actually do the same thing.
Yeah.
You go back home and you're sitting there and you go, oh man, why did I phrase that this way? Or why did I tell them this? I've done that ruling 500 times, and man, I can't believe I messed it up. So like, judges are people, they're going to get it wrong. It's a part of the growing experience, and that's what the appeals are for, is to help through that.
No, that's true. Judges are people too, folks. You heard it here first. I always thought maybe not, but
well,
but no,
maybe I don't know.
Yeah, they're great, but yeah, and so are you, and all the players. Everybody's great. I love everyone. Everyone's awesome. And speaking of awesome, I want to kind of touch on your commitment to hosting these larger Flesh and Blood events, which is awesome. I want, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but what is the thing that spurred your belief in this game, right? That pushed you to make that kind of commitment? What about Fab made you believe in it?
This answer is going to be the answer echoed 1,000 times across every platform. It's the community. I don't know how LSS has figured this out, but they've got the secret sauce in this community. It's probably fairly reciprocal between LSS and the players and the community itself, but man, there is just something awesome about the Flesh and Blood community. I go to Nats. I barely walked in the door to go get my judge shirt, and I am just bombarded by a big burly Iowa man.
Who could that be?
I don't know. It's somebody who's mistaken about beer being bread, but this big burly Iowa man and a gaggle of other people. There's hugs and high fives, and I was just like, oh, listen, I was like, guys, I gotta go get my judge stuff going. They're like, okay, fine. But I mean, just I think that there's just that secret sauce in Flesh and Blood, and I do think that a lot of this kind of flavor and just community love, it comes from the top down. LSS is, out of all of the different games that we sell at our store, LSS is by far the one who personally invests and wants to know about us. They have contacted me about things. They've set up meetings to talk about different events we do, to find out how many people we can have, what are our needs. And just look at the Armory kit. I mean, what other game is doing anything close to that right now? No one. And like they're investing into communities because that's what drives games. After the Cincinnati calling, when I actually had a chance to talk to LSS and be involved in more of their organized play process, that's what really just put me over the edge. I'm like, man, these guys they're on it. They want to know about me as like our first conversation was probably 45 minutes long, and I don't even know how much of that was talked about the game. It was just
Yeah.
is just interested about who I was and why I'm doing this and why I think Flesh and Blood would be cool and what they can do for me and how they can answer questions and all that kind of stuff. So I think when you have people doing that, it encourages other people to do that. And I think that LSS has just squarely hit the nail on the head, and it's shown. I mean, they've grown in just massive leaps and bounds, and I'm very confident that they're going to keep doing that.
From your perspective, you're pretty confident they're going to continue to do it. Where do you see the game in 2 years, 5 years, beyond that?
I think in 2 years, the next 2 years are going to be very cementing years and very forming years. I think like even we were just talking about the judge community. I know from talking to different judges, there's a bunch of structural things happening behind the scenes that people don't notice or don't even care to notice or even hear about because it's boring. Like who wants to hear about a judge conference on talking about slow play? I mean, it's boring, but it's something that's necessary. So we have all of these structural things happening and building this up. And Flesh and Blood has like this problem of which came first, the chicken or the egg. Well, they said both. It's like we have a chicken and an egg. We're trying to figure it out. And then the egg hatched while we were still trying to figure out which came first. And now we have a bunch of chicks and, they have their hands full.
Yeah.
So I think the next 2 years is going to be a very, very important year of like cementing things and figuring out the best flow. I can tell a big difference from the beginning of this year to now. They have made some improvements, and I think that as they start getting qualified people into needed positions, that will really start just firming up the structure of Flesh and Blood. 5 years beyond that, I think one of the biggest things we're going to see is I think we're going to see some more different types of like formats. I think we're going to see different types of formats, some player driven one and some new ones, just because that's just the nature of TCG. So, I mean, obviously we know that the one that we know is coming up next is Living Legend, but
Yeah.
I think that, obviously we're also going to see a PvE thing coming out soon. I'm really excited about that. So you have all of these different things that I think is just going to just catapult there. If they are smart and careful, I think that there's their IP can go into a lot of different spaces.
Yes.
So I think we're going to see Flesh and Blood into a lot of other arenas, even outside of card games. And I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we had, a couple weeks ago, we had Tommy's Top Picks, does a lot of like comic stuff. We talked heavily on how great Flesh and Blood is like set up for that kind of media, that kind of, product. And God, it's very exciting. And I'm sure that the smart thing would to be do it methodically. We don't want to jammed out there, but that kind of leads me to say, like, do you think there's anything that LSS could do to like help sustain this like kind of growth we're talking about, or do you think they can only mess it up at this point?
Well, unfortunately, owning and managing businesses, I know that there are more ways to go wrong than there are to go right. It just seems like you can step in a pothole pretty quickly. So yeah, they definitely have to be careful about that. I do think that they're approaching their next level of maturity, where the customer base, the players, the community is starting to go, okay, you've done this now for a few years. We've done this now for a few years. Mistakes are not going to be forgiven as lightly as they were a year ago. So I definitely think it's important that they shore up some of the things like that, which I think they are. But I wish, as healthy as it is with the community, I do wish that their organized play team was bigger and had enough manpower to talk to stores.
Mhm.
Because, and I also think there should be an intermediate tournament quality item event between like a road to nationals or a PTQ and a battle hardened. What if what if if Harry Tarantula up in Canada, what if he wants to run a 1K?
Yeah.
The only choice he has is to do an on-demand event, just like every store is doing an on-demand event for their drafts. You know what I mean? It gets lost in the shuffle. So I think you need something intermediate for like a store that's like, I want to do something bigger than an armory or a road to nationals, but not so big that it's a battle hardened. So they need something for stores in that intermediate. That could even have a little bit of elo bump or things like that. I know like our store, like if they offered something like that, I would run one every quarter, even
Yeah.
if it cost me money, because like if I would pay LSS every quarter to run an event like that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because there are a decent amount of stores that have been toying with that kind of like I want to run some like 1Ks here and there,
Right.
and these larger events and that is something that I never really thought about was maybe LSS can kind of give some incentive, right? For
Yeah.
like an added incentive for players to come out other than just a really sick prize pool,
Right.
because a semi-local store to me, Owl Central Games, they try to do 1Ks like once a quarter, but like
Mm-hmm.
they get a decent amount of people, but there could always be more, right? And
Sure.
and the more people that show up, like the easier that kind of prize pool becomes for the TO. So yeah,
Yep.
it's pretty interesting. So LSS, if you're listening, we know you are. Do that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's going to bring us to one of my favorite sections of the podcast, the fresh faves, Keith.
It's one of my favorites too, actually.
and as you know, I'm going to ask you a couple of your favorite things, and you're going to hopefully answer them. First, who is your favorite hero?
Easily Cheyenne.
Oh, okay. Why is
Yeah.
that?
There's so much about Cheyenne I love. First of all, the art, absolutely gorgeous.
Mhm.
I'm really sad. I haven't been able to find one of the large arts version of the card. I don't even know if it exists, but if I were ever tempted to get a large art card, it would be Cheyenne. But love the art. Everything aesthetically about the card is so cool. I told you earlier, I'm really big into D&D.
Mhm.
We stream D&D and stuff at the Realm and do a bunch of stuff like that. And my favorite character that I've ever made in D&D was a Shapeshifter Bard. It was so
Oh.
fun. I worked with my DM on that, and my group, the other players on the table did not know I was a shapeshifter. Like it was really
Oh.
cool. Like yeah, because what I would do is every time I would shapeshift, I would cast prestidigitation and make it look like I was casting like disguise self. So they just assume I was casting a spell disguise self and changing the way I looked. And I'd
Oh
have to
my
roll
God.
deception checks and stuff like that. It was just so much fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and then Cheyenne came out, I was like, ooh, it's a shape changer. Oh, that's so cool. I was like, and then on top of that, I'm a bard in real life. I tell people this. I love being creative and having fun like that. And I really love decks that are just out of nowhere.
Mhm.
I don't win a lot with China, although I'm getting close. I've
Okay.
really gotten my deck pretty close. I'll play you and I'll play you down in Columbus like for
Oh, yeah.
Blitz, but it's pretty cool how I've gotten it. But it's so much fun sitting down across from somebody and they go, "Who you playing?" I go, "Cheyenne," and they go, "Oh, I don't even know what to do with that." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, that's right."
Good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Blitz doesn't have side. If I wish Blitz had sideboarding, because I could almost guarantee I would give me an edge, because I think people would just sideboard wrong.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. I do like that answer. I think it might be the first time we got Cheyenne on the pod.
It might be the only time too.
You guys are few but strong. The Cheyenne
We are.
fans out there.
The only stand group smaller than Levia.
Yeah. All right. Let's relax. What? Moving on to the next one. What is your favorite weapon, Keith?
It's a toss-up between Galaxy Black and Talishar. I actually noticed Talishar before I noticed Cheyenne, and I thought it was just a really cool lore piece. It's like, oh, here's this broken sword, and you use it and it eventually breaks. It's just really cool. Like, I would almost want to read a whole novel about Talishar.
Yeah.
But Galaxy Black, I think also just the artwork for Galaxy Black just is really cool. So one of those two, probably Talishar. If I had to, if you put a gun to head, I'd probably squeeze out Talishar.
I think Talishar's a fair answer, though. Galaxy Black is a really cool card and one of my favorite arts on one of the common weapons. What is your favorite equipment?
I'm probably gonna have to go with Mage Master boots.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
you like the cool, generic stuff, obviously, but just the stuff that makes a deck hum. I feel like.
Yeah, Mage Master boots. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And in my Cheyenne deck, in our local area, there's quite a bit of Briars and Blitz. So nothing feels better than turn one slapping down a couple weird item things and then getting a lightning, and biting them in a lightning. And they go, huh? This is great.
That is actually really cool. And that's the beautiful thing about Shanna.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like I put the data specialization. I can't think of what it's called now.
Microprocessor.
Oh yeah. So you microprocessor go again and then put in another item and you're like, oh, this is so great.
That's pretty wild.
Then put a plunder run in your arsenal and then next turn crippling crush is great.
Oh jeez, my God! All right, maybe we shouldn't play when I come to Columbus.
It's pretty fun.
Now it brings us to your favorite non-hero, non-weapon, non-equipment card. Your run-of-the-mill cards: instance, attack actions, and non-attack actions.
Well, I think it's gonna have to be Art of War.
Okay, all right. I love that card.
Yeah, it just does everything. For a long time, I was doing some CC. My CC deck was Lexi, and Art of War is kind of fun because if you have two attack actions in your arsenal, you can use them both with Art of War.
Pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome. It stops some Bravo things.
Yeah, Art of War. Personally, I like Art of War because it always turns off blood debt for me, but
sure.
Almost always. But it is the coolest kind of modal card in the game as it is, and the art's pretty dope too. You're just like, oh, Cloud Guy, he shows up every once in a while in this game. Can't wait till he's a hero.
Oh yeah, I think it's gonna be a PvE thing.
Yeah, most likely. That sounds the most. He's probably just as a regular hero, he'd be too powerful. He's like, oh, this is like
sure.
Enlightened Strikes and Art of Wars all the time. That was a fresh faves and a pretty unique one at that with Shanna, I will say. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the Fall Brawl because I'm very excited about it. Before we even started recording, we were talking about how much fun we're going to have. And I just wanted to, talk to you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
The Rome Games has done a few large-scale, kind of large prize pool tournaments at this point, right? Since your inception a year ago, which is like crazy. You've done so much in a year. What were your kind of initial thoughts behind putting these on? Now, I know you mentioned that you had a space, right? But there is a jump from like doing a 1K to a 5K and now like a 10K.
Yeah. So the little journey here was right before we did our first 5K, Dragon Shield actually contacted me and said, hey, we're looking for a store in your area to partner with and do some things. Is that something you're interested in doing? And it was an email. And I was like, man, this sounds like a scam. Like,
Yeah.
are you wanting to get some money so you can free a prince over in Africa or the Middle East or something? Like, I mean, how'd you get a hold of me? And I even had said that. I was like, how did you get a hold of me? Like, well, we Googled you. I'm like,
All right.
okay.
That's some
And then-
cold calling right there. Let me tell you.
And I was like, okay, well, and then like, can we set up a meeting to talk? I'm like, sure. And so then I was like, yeah, I'll talk to anybody once, sure. So I get on this phone call, and my rep, I could barely understand them because they're not from America.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, this is not good. But I started talking. I found out they had moved to Florida, and their husband went overseas, and that's where they met. And now they work for Dragon Shield. And they found out that they did this program over in Europe. They want to try it over in the US. And so basically, long story short, they kind of have been sponsoring us for a lot of our events. They did sleeves for us for our 10K, last 10K. I can't go into too much detail yet, but all I can say is our tournament area at the Realm is getting dragnified. And it's
Ooh.
going to be really cool. It's going to be really
awesome.
cool. It's really cool. It's probably been one of the hardest things to like not talk to people about. And they said, they're like, I was like, well, what if people ask her, what can I say? They're like, just tell them that the store is getting dragnified. I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah, so it's going to be cool. It's going to be really cool. But yeah, so that was a really neat partnership that kind of started. And then my brother and I talked about, we're like, okay, so if you find the realm on a map and draw about an hour, maybe two, a lot of people are going to have heard about it.
mhm.
Like, you had never heard about the realm like 6 months ago, right? Or
Sure,
8 months
yeah.
ago, whatever it was. So we're like, all right, so we know we want to start running quality events because no one else is doing that. And Flesh and Blood is a great game. I think the community would love something like this, and I think we have the tools and resources to do that. So we're like, we're going to commit to do 3 events for 2022. We're going to do a 5K and then 2 10Ks because we knew the first one was going to be a lot lighter attended because no one knows who we are.
Mhm.
So we did that, and the night before there was like a major storm, like blizzard, that happened, and we had like 20 people get
geez.
refunds. I think there's only like 26 people who showed up for the first 5K.
Oh, man.
And at the players meeting, I'm like, okay, everybody, thanks for coming out, thanks for weathering the storm. We got 26 people. We're doing our rounds. We're going to cut to the top 8. And we got a 5K on the line. So if you need help with any judging, we have some judges here and all that. And I just couldn't give me a thing. And like every player walked up and they're like, when we saw 26 people and then you got up there and said you're still paying out 5K, we were just blown away. We could not believe you were actually going to stick to your guns. I was like, well, that's. I felt like we're committed to do a quality event, and this is how I've done everything in my business. If I say I'm going to do something, I don't care what it costs me or what I have to pay. I'm going to make my promise good.
That goes a long way too, and I think a lot of people know that, right? But
Yeah.
and for those of you who don't, like that kind of commitment is huge, right? It's not like something that a lot of places will do, and that is really cool to hear. I'm sure it was tough financially, 26 people for 5K, but yeah, it's you roll with the punches, and I think I mean, personally, I don't think we would be here on the eve of like a 10K that's looking to be like a total blast and like a real success if that were not the case.
Absolutely. And it was really cool. Like, the players were very, very awesome about it. And, they did their best to kind of like try to buy something to help. And it was really cool. But I was like, don't feel bad. I want you guys to leave here going, this is a great time, a great experience. So, yeah, that's what kind of happened from there. And then to back up right before that, after Jacob and I decided to do these events, it was around December. Well, Abby from Flesh and Pod comes into my store because her parents used to live in Mansfield. And she walked in my store and she's like, hey, I hear you guys have Flesh and Blood. I want to buy some stuff for my husband for Christmas, and I don't want him to know about it, so I'm buying it here, or something like that. I was like, oh, cool. And I don't even know how, but somehow it came up in our like 2-minute conversation because it was pretty busy because like around Christmas.
Mhm.
I think I only talked to her for like 2 minutes, no joke. Came up that they're going to start this podcast, Flesh and Pod. And I said, listen, we're going to do some cool stuff this year. And it sounds like you guys are doing cool stuff. Like let's have let's like have our ideas make a baby. You know what I mean? Let's do this. Like let's go. And she took my number, and then Jordan's like, yeah, what I got for Christmas was Keith's number. And yeah,
what we
like
all wanted.
I know. It's a lot easier to get than you might think, but but anyway, yeah. So yeah, we just kind of hit it off, and then they really kind of pumped some information for the 5K, and they were there and helped out a bunch. And you know, I'm thoroughly convinced that there's a lot of moving parts to make something successful.
Mhm.
You know, success there's all kinds of little motivational things, but I've observed this in my life that success is just hard work that's prepared is the simplest way to talk about it. You know, Jacob and I were working hard, doing a lot of things right, but some of that's just when an opportunity arises, when an Abby comes into your shop, you be ready to give her your number and be ready to do cool things, you know?
Yeah.
And then from there, after the 5K, Flesh and Pod had Dalen Mack on their show.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And once again, just like this weird side conversation, I was like, hey, can you guys give me Dalen Mack's information? I want to see if he might want to come to our next 10K or whatever that we're doing in July. Like, yeah, sure. So I get Dalen's information. I was like, hey, we're doing this 10K, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, that sounds so cool. And he goes, who are you going to have like do the commentary? And I'm like, I don't know. We are, I guess. I mean, I don't know anybody doing commentary, so we're gonna figure it out ourselves. We're gonna, you know, pull it up by the bootstraps here. And he's like, well, I've got this friend. I think he'd be a really good pair with you, and I think he'd probably be able to help you. I'm like, all right. He goes, he'll be at he'll be at the first Pro Tour. I'll try to get you guys there. I won't be there, but I'll get you guys together. I'm like, all right, cool. So my brother and I kept trying to get in touch with this friend of Dalen Mack, and finally at the last day, we met Tan and Grace.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah, it was like we met Tan in between a round. He's like, oh yeah, and we talked a little bit. And he's like, what are you guys doing? We said what we're doing. He's like, oh wow, this is really cool. I want to be a part of this, and we can make this happen. He goes, would you care if we brought in another person? I'm like, I think we can do that. So he brought in Charmer. And then when you guys had the big round table, so I swear all you guys, all this podcast crew, like you, Flesh and Pod, Flake, all you guys, you're gonna like ban me from watching your shows because what's basically been happening is like I just watch all your shows and you guys go, hey, here's this really cool thing, and I'm like, I'll do that. Yeah, let's go. I just raise my hand and go, let's do it. But Flake was on there talking, and he said something about like it was really tough because sometimes you don't know when you're going to get another gig for casting and you know all this kind of thing. So I reached out to Flake and I was like, hey, I got enough money in my budget. Do you want to come to the 10K in Ohio with Flake or with Charmer and Tannen? He's like, yeah, great. I was like, oh, cool. And then which actually would end up being pretty good because Tannen got COVID like right before that, and he was still going to try and make it, but then had a bunch of flight issues. So it ended up being pretty good that we got Flake as, you know, there, and that's been a really cool thing. So basically, you know, it's Logan's fault. This whole thing is Logan's fault. He introduced me to you at the Pro Tour. Like once again, I got to the Pro Tour. I barely even stepped foot, and here comes this burly Iowan dude who's just wrong about beer and bread. And he's like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, I'm breathing. And he's like, come here, let me introduce you to this guy. His name's Tommy Fresh. I'm like, okay. Like, what kind of name is Fresh?
Yeah, it's Irish. I don't know.
Yeah, and then we talked, and you did the interview with your booth and stuff, and
it was awesome. And I do want to also shout out that, like, and I know you're talking about us banning you from listening to our show. We're not going to. Nobody's going to ban you from doing anything. But it was the coolest thing to me, right? Is I had Mara on from Blackwing Studio, and you listened to that show, and you were like, "Hey, we should probably get her to do some like art stuff at the Fall Brawl." And I was like, "Yes, like that's awesome. Let's go, like good people like working together. That's what I want. Like this is amazing."
I hadn't even finished your episode when I contacted you. I was probably like 15 minutes in. I was like, I'm done. I'm sold. Yep, get Mara here.
Yeah.
Like you gave me information. I was like, Mara, what do I got to do to get you to this Fall Brawl? And then we've kind of like chatted a bunch online. She's such a cool person.
So
and then
awesome.
we finally met. We finally met at US Nats. Oh, it was just a blast. I was not intending for this Fall Brawl to be what it's become. Like I figured this was going to be like a 2023 kind of a goal.
Yeah.
And so in a similar way to like kind of like LSS, we have a little bit of the same problem of like, there's some needs that we have coming up too. And I'm like, we've kind of grown a little bit too fast too. And I want to make sure that we're doing the right things right and not leaving something behind. But just things kind of really snowballed. And I think you said it right there. Like cool people like doing cool things. And there you go.
That's the truth. Ain't that the truth?
Right.
So
and I'm just stupid enough to do it.
Yeah, well, we need stupid folks like you, Keith.
Thanks you.
Now, when this Fall Brawl was announced and we all started talking about it, it was not yet a battle hardened. Can you tell us about how that changed?
Yeah, so way back when in December-ish, when I contacted LSS initially, it may have been November, I don't remember now, but just kind of talked about that because like I wanted to try to make sure we could get a road to nationals or a PTQ, but the way that they kind of have that set up, I was always like a month behind and like just a little off and be able to run some of these other events. So yeah, so then I contacted them I tried to get a hold of them before the 5K, but that was when Indianapolis was going on. So it didn't quite, by the time that we were able to get schedules to mesh to talk about it, it was kind of too late. And so then I was talking to them about the 10K and I was like, what do I got to do to make this a battle harden? And, the particular guy I was talking to is like, well, there's a different department that kind of runs that. Let me kind of run that up the flagpole. I'll see what happens. And then he's like, but I know that there's just not enough time for this July thing. And then I'm like, okay, cool. I think it was like maybe a week before the July 10K, they contact me again. They're like, hey, we just wanted to reach out and say we appreciate all the cool stuff you're doing. And we hope that you keep doing this. And we hope you're not discouraged, but there's a particular system and structure in place for battle hardens, and at that time they hadn't done the Living Legend change, so like they wanted to be very careful about the number of battle hardens introduced because they didn't want just things legending out in a week. They're like, we're trying to be really careful about how many we do and blah 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 and where and what, but we wanted to say that we've appreciated all you've done and we see that you're doing some of the right things right, and all we can say is just keep doing that and good things will happen. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I was looking at when to do the Fall Brawl. I really, at first I didn't want to do it in October because I was a little afraid of event fatigue.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I can't do it in November because the Worlds is the first week, the pre-release comes out the second week, and then you have the third week, which is just too close to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's like, and then we can't do it Thanksgiving. Like no one's going to come to this in November. And then I just have a personal rule of December is this month of trash scheduling. So
Yeah.
I just don't schedule things in December because I hate myself, but not that much. so I was like, I'm crazy and stupid, but not that much. So I was like, I can't do it then. And then I was like, well, maybe we can do something in like January, but then it's cold and nasty in Ohio. So maybe February. Then that gets us kind of close to when the PTQ season probably will start, I'm guessing, February, March. So I'm like, let's go back to October and look at this again. And so I found this event in Columbus, our event center in Columbus. I'm like, okay, we're just going to like shoot for the stars here. Hopefully this just kind of works out. And I got it all together. We had put some advertising out. I think we'd only really been advertising it for maybe 2 weeks or something. And I got an email from LSS and they said, hey, we want to have a meeting with you. So I had a sit down meeting with a couple of the guys, and they're like, "Hey, we just really wanted to say we really think you're doing a great job, and you're doing all the right things right, and we want to reward you and say, if you want to, we're going to upgrade your event to a battle hardened." I'm like, "Oh, I'll think about it. I'll talk to my brother and I'll get back to you." I was like, yeah, we're going to do that. But, like on the business side of things, you can't throw your cards on the table like that. You got to be like, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Is that a big thing? Do people care about that? So, but
battle what?
battle harden. I don't know, maybe. But so I kind of worked with them, and there's a few kind of loops we had to jump through, and I hope I know people have been kind of frustrated with LSS and like in the time frame that they're communicating things, but this all goes back to like this learning process that I think has improved this. They've learned a lot of lessons this year, and I'm really excited to see how they improve next year for that. I mean, from the time they contacted me until the time we announced it, there was a lot of things that we had to take care of because I had already announced some things for our event. We had to kind of adjust some stereotypical battle hardened qualifications and how to get approved from people, things like that. And so we got it all worked out. By the time it all got worked out, then it was like, well, we want to wait until after the US Nats or whatever, and announce this. I'm like, okay, that because they're like, we don't want this to be shadowed by the national tournament scene, so we're going to do that afterwards. I'm like, okay, and I think like it was a convenient call for them because we had already been promoting the event, so people already knew about it. So it wasn't like, oh no, there's this random battle hardened guy that showed up on the map. It was more of like, oh, here's this event that you all knew about, and it's getting upgraded. So
I will say is well earned, and it's very exciting. Obviously it was going to be an exciting event regardless, but it's just kind of seeing that slapped on there is kind of cool. And
for sure,
it's very, very exciting. So, but that's not the only thing happening there that weekend.
Nope.
And the one thing I love about what you guys do at these events is like there's a lot of like auxiliary activities and events kind of going on the whole weekend. It feels very much like, I don't know, like the Magic Fests used to be, or even what like nationals can be and stuff like that.
Right.
So clearly there's this emphasis on there's quote unquote something for everyone. What can folks expect to see it, not only the Fall Brawl, but other future Realm events?
Well, I got in touch with Elaine Hammondtree too through all you group of podcasters. I can't remember how. I don't remember. Maybe it was Flaky was talking to Elaine at the time. I don't remember now, but she needed a partner for Vegas, and I did too. So it was Logan. See, it's Logan's fault. Logan got me.
Logan.
It is Logan's fault. He got me in touch with Elaine, and she needed a partner for the teams in Vegas. And so while we were there, hung out with Elaine. That was the first time I got to meet her in person. I was like, I knew she cosplayed, but it didn't like occur to me like who she was until like I got to Vegas and we started like physically seeing each other and talking. I was like, oh, this is this person. Okay, my bad. But she's just an awesome person, and we started talking, and she was just telling me, she was kind of venting about some cosplay woes, and I was like, man, it'd be really cool to do a cosplay at our 10K in July. It's like, there's not enough time for that, but I want to do another one. And so I took a bunch of notes of what she said, and I tried to implement that, and it sounds like the cosplay community is super pumped about our event.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
What better way to have a thematic cosplay event than Halloween? So it's just awesome. Yeah, just awesome. So pretty pumped about that. We got at the first 10K, out of necessity, we kind of had a group of people get together and we ate afterwards, and it turned into, and we have in my hometown, there's this like bar in the middle, underground in a basement, and it's a speakeasy, like, and so that's where the whole speakeasy idea came from. And we just, a bunch of friends got together and was eating and drinking and having fun, and then I was like, and then someone, I might have been Logan again. Someone's like, hey,
Probably.
I bet people would pay a lot of money to come to something like this. I was like, I bet they probably would. Let's try to make that happen. And so I was like, I found an event center that could kind of cater all this. And it's really nice because after one of these events, it's hard to go find a restaurant that can hold 12, 18, 20 people. But now it can happen there at the event. So you get that experience of decompressing and unwinding after like rigorous thought and high competitive tournaments, and you get to have fun with your friends and have some food. There's going to be a ton of games, drafting. There's going to be Flesh and Blood playing. We got the Alpha Draft, which I thought it was pretty slick the way I snuck you in there. Like, I don't think people realized.
I won it fair and square, folks. I bought the playmat. I swear I'm going on record. I did not ask for this, so I'm stoked to draft Alpha and just lose to Dagon White anyway. So, like, it's.
Well, I mean, in all sincerity, it was very, very randomized. I mean, you watched me do it. Some of them, right? Yeah. Like, shuffled it up, pulled 6 cards out, rolled dice. I was like, I can't get more random than this, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I appreciate you, and I will give you the $40 later. No, I'm kidding.
yeah. But we got that going. There's going to be just a bunch of other things. I don't want to kind of give all of it away because I want some of it to be like a surprise when you get there. But there's going to be a lot of fun stuff that's going on there. And moving forward into future events, we definitely have some things that we are working for the pipeline. I think that you're going to come to this and go, that was fun. When's the next one? And just keep your ear to the ground.
That would be my next question. Do we have anything set in stone for 2023? But I'm sure we're a little bit away from announcing that because we'd also like to know what LSS is also doing in 2023.
This is true. I will say this. There are things on the calendar being discussed. I have some meetings scheduled. I have one meeting scheduled in October, one in November, and there'll probably be a few in December. But there will be things in 2023.
Oh, I'm excited, my friend.
If you like things.
I love things.
Oh, man, there you go.
I also wanted to point out, before we go here, that your kind of commitment to working with content creators is like all sizes, myself included, which I thank you for giving me a speakeasy ticket to give away. That was a ton of fun. Is this something you'd like to continue to do? Because it seems like to have gotten a great response.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many positives out of this. Like, this goes back to the whole community and building community. And like I said, I like doing cool things with cool people. So that's why you got a speakeasy ticket. That's why other people got speakeasy tickets. And as we start growing and, building a better system, I would like to reach out to some other people too. So, the great thing is you guys provide a lot of fuel for thought. So I'm like, that sounds like something I would want to do in a drunken stupor. So let's do that.
Yeah. My goal is to eventually have Keith reach out to every single one of my guests to have them do something at a 10K. No, I'm kidding.
You want to do something? Hey, let's talk about it. It is literally that simple. Because that sounds like a great idea.
It does.
It does.
Now, before we say our goodbyes, do you have any prediction on who's going to take down the Battle Hardened?
Ooh.
And why is it me?
I don't know. Like, we have quite a few. There's quite a few quality players coming. Matt Folks, actually from England, contacted me and was trying to figure out how to get out here.
Ooh,
because he's like, I could probably get there and then just go on to Worlds a couple weeks later, but we just couldn't quite get flights and stuff to like mesh for him. But I was like, that'd been really cool. Oh man, so who's gonna win? I don't know. I feel like Dagon. It might be his time. I
think so.
He's been to this. Dagon, I got you in my corner. That's what we'll say.
Feels like, maybe it's not necessarily a hometown advantage or home field advantage for Dagon, but it kind of feels like it, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
We call him the zookeeper, Dagon. Keith thinks you're going to win. I think I'm going to win. And when I win, people are really going to start to question the integrity of this event. This guy wins an alpha draft spot. He wins the Battle Hardened. What is going on?
What is happening?
But But in all seriousness, I'm super excited. I'm glad that we got to sit down and chat, buddy.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hang out in person next week as well.
Oh, for sure.
Is there any? I mean, pretty much we've plugged everything, the whole show. But is there anything else you'd like to plug as well?
Sure. I think the only other things I would say is on Wednesdays, right before your bello, we have at 8 Eastern Standard Time. The Realm gets on here. We have different people coming in. We'll practice for events and just play different decks. We've done gridiron draft tournaments. It's just kind of a hangout, talk about Flesh and Blood, play some Flesh and Blood, and not next week, but the week after. Alex Norville is a rep from LSS who will be in the States, and he's coming to the Brawl and visiting some other game stores along the way to his road to Worlds. And he will be on our Wednesday stream. So if people have any questions, it'd be great to pop in and ask an LSS rep. But we have that, and then on Tuesdays we do a D&D live stream with a bunch of friends. It's a homemade campaign, and it's on our Twitch, the Realm's Twitch, and go to realmgamingnetwork.com and you can find all the cool stuff.
I will link all that stuff in the show notes. You all can still find me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. You can join the Discord, The Buds. We'll have a lot of fun in there. Subscribe, like, comment the YouTube. If you listen to this on Spotify or iTunes or whatever, like rate it, leave a review, a good or bad one. It just helps. It just helps. Well, actually, just make it a good one. Sorry. I always like to end the show talking about food, and I have a question for you, Keith, because Jordan was on here and he spoke the praises of the Skyline chili. And now, are you a little bit more down, like, in touch with reality?
Yes, I am.
Is it all it's cracked up to be, my friend?
Have you ever had escargot or caviar?
Yes.
Did you like it?
I liked it. I like a lot of things.
Okay. See, the first time I had caviar, it felt like I was just licking the bottom of a pond.
Okay. I could see that. Yeah.
I would rather have caviar than that nasty chili.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh no. Jordan's like been messaging me saying, I can't wait to buy you Skyline chili. I'm like, oh no.
No. So there is a weird thing about Skyline chili though. So there's one near our house, but the owner has his own recipe, and apparently Skyline Chili franchise allows owners to either buy the franchise chili or they can make their own. So
interesting.
I actually am going to give Jordan a break, and at the 10K, I'm going to try their Skyline chili because supposedly it is good.
All right.
Just a Skyline about my house, it's just garbage, hot garbage. It's made by garbage monkeys, and
oh my God.
I should also add I don't like chili, so
okay. Well, okay, that is a certain asterisk that probably needs to be put in there, but we'll ignore that you said that, and I can't wait to watch you enjoy Skyline with me together next week.
Now, in all sincerity, though, you want to talk about cool food? I might do this for you.
Okay.
Do you like Italian pizza subs?
Yeah, I love it.
Sure. Yeah, we're American. So there's this place in Mansfield called the Leaning Tower of Pizza.
Okay.
Their claim to fame, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but their claim to fame is they're the first pizza-only restaurant like in the States. So apparently you could get pizza, but like there wasn't just a pizza place.
Okay.
Like where you could only get pizza. So they're saying they're like the first. And they have all when you go, it's in the basement of this old building. So it's there forever. But when you go in there, they have all of these posters and magazines and pictures of famous people from like probably the 30s or something to current. Because anytime a famous person goes to their place, they get a poster signed by them. And like it is literally plastered from wall to ceiling with these posters.
Okay.
But that is a unique thing we have. I might bring some subs down there to let people try that because it's pretty cool.
Is the pizza
better
good?
Than chili? Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Better than chili, I can say that.
It's such a funny thing to claim that that like they're the first. It's so hard to prove. I feel
Well, like I need to figure out the exact wording because like it's very specific. It's like first pizza only. It's weird. Like it was the first restaurant to only serve pizza or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, well, you know what? I can't wait to witness that. It sounds amazing. But Keith, thank you so much for coming on, and everybody.
Oh man, it's been a blast
for listening, and I'm excited for what is to come. And everybody, please have a great week.
I do remember seeing Jordan.
Just the hands, right? He's kind of cute.